What do you do when you've got a giant piece of spare wood that is a shame to throw away? You add some legs and make a DIY desk, of course. So if you're interested in how I repurposed a sideboard top into a functional desk for my spare room, then let's have a look. This upcycling project, I can't even call it a makeover because it basically started from nothing, is a bit of a treasure because I took a piece of scrap wood and have turned it into something that I'm going to use every day in my home. And that is what upcycling is all about, trash to treasure. Not the best quality wood, but was a nice size and worth doing something with. The underside of the wood was a little bit rough and ready because of course no one was ever going to see that. So it had some chipped veneer that I needed to remove and also some planks of wood that were easy enough to take off. And I also removed some nails with some pliers, so we got about a decent surface to start from, or at least free from splinters and scratches. So unfortunately this sideboard top had experienced a bit of water damage, which had gone through the veneer and into this wood as well. It wasn't too bad, but I did need to sand some of that off. So I used my orbital sander along the edges where it was black and the condition was the worst, and hand sanded the curved edges of the sideboard too. Where the veneer had been glued down, there were some black marks left and in general an uneven tone to the surface. And initially I thought I was going to try and leave this wood as natural as possible. So to even out that tone I used some wood bleach. So this wood bleach is called Liberon and is very simple to use. You need your protective gear, but otherwise you simply brush it on, leave it for about 20 minutes and then wait for it to dry and see how it looks. If it isn't quite even enough or light enough, you just do another round. But it was when I was applying this wood bleach that I saw some of the deeper scratches in the wood that I hadn't noticed before, and that's just because this is quite a soft wood, so it was easy to dent. After applying the wood bleach, it's really important to wash down the wood 2 or 3 times to make sure you remove any traces of that bleach, because any future paint or stain that you apply to it, the bleach would eat away at that and just leave you probably with a mess. So onto those sneaky little holes in the wood, I applied some wood filler and applied it just higher than the surface of the tabletop so that when I sanded it smooth, it would be even with the table. I also added a little bit of wood filler in places that it wasn't essential. Some of the bits around the edges where it was just the natural pattern of the wood that there were a few little holes. Because I would have to paint this table to some extent, paint over slightly holy wood looks like imperfections more so than if you can just see that that is the natural shape of the wood underneath. It's pretty important to use a primer after you've used a wood filler because paint or stain will not apply the same over the wood filler or the paint because they don't have the same level of porosity. So even though the colour of the paint on top will be the same, it will be obvious that there was something underneath it. I did 2 coats of Boss primer in the grey to give a consistent finish for my future coats to stick to, and I lightly sanded in between to make sure that it was a nice even surface. So now that I had my sideboard top primed and ready for refinishing in some interesting way, my next step was to attach the legs. And I attached the legs before finishing off the sideboard top so that I would be able to walk around the table easily while it was raised up to a decent height. So my new shiny legs, the only thing I had to buy for this project, I got some hairpin legs in a pastel green. Bit of an unusual choice, pastel green, granted. However, I do love a good green, it is in my logo, and I thought it was just a bit more interesting, a bit more fun than a typical black hairpin leg. But when the hairpin legs arrived, the screws that came with it, which are the recommended screws because that is what the manufacturer has given you, were thicker than the sideboard top that I had to work with. So my plan was to cut a piece of MDF on both sides of my tabletop to create enough thickness to use the screws that had been provided. I used a circular saw to cut out 2 rectangles of MDF about the same width as the size of the tops. They didn't need to be particularly beautiful because no one was going to see them, but I just sanded the edges as well to get rid of any roughness, so it was nice to handle. Now when you're gluing anything, it's important that you've got your clamps or whatever you're going to weigh it down with before you start. So I had 2 clamps, and the heaviest things I had, my circular saw in its box and a box of cat food. Very helpful, very professional. You can't go wrong with Gorilla wood glue for using to attach wood. So I wiggled a line of glue and then spread it out so that as much of the MDF would be secured as possible. I attached the clamp to the top of the MDF, but then for the underside I attached the clamp to the table that I was working on, as I didn't want the clamp to potentially mark or squish the softwood underside, which was now my desktop. With my extra bits of MDF creating enough thickness for the screws, I marked out where I needed to drill, and this is with my marksman tool, which you push down over the hole that you want to make, and it shoots a little jet of chalk. So you've got exactly the right spot where you want to drill. Chalk's great because it just wipes off if you make a mistake, or if you can see any of it and you need to get rid of it. And also I've found in the past that if you're using a pen or a pencil to mark that spot, then sometimes the hole is too small for the pen or pencil to reach. We don't get exactly in the centre of the spot, so this marksman tool just is genius. So with the screws in place, I was relieved to see that the scrap MDF I had used was thick enough and that they weren't visible on the tabletop, so that was perfect. And it was then that I flipped over to see how it all looked, and it was starting to come together, and all I had left to do was create the pattern that I wanted on top of this new desktop. So of course I've started from the grey primer rather than the natural wood. That is slightly going to impact the colours that I put on top of it. Initially I put a coat of Au Naturel, which is a water-based gel stain. And I did this because I wanted to see what it would look like to go back to more of the natural wood look, of course. Not the natural wood, but the natural wood colouring. After one coat, and I expected to need to do several, it was nice, but it was a little bit watery, a little bit wishy-washy. I would have expected to need to do a couple of coats of the gel stain. However, after the first one, it wasn't quite feeling like what I was imagining in my head, so I decided to change tact for coat 2. And this is where it looks a little bit scary with the various colours, and it's one of those trust the process kind of situations. I applied stripes of both the original Au Naturel gel stain, Tobacco Road and Up in Smoke, so 3 of the water-based gel stains. So the natural colour, a grey and a brown. If I'd had a white, probably I would have used a white as well to make it a little bit more pale. So I applied the stains in lines and then used an applicator sponge to drag it down the length of the table, trying to keep the lines quite straight. So even though the colouring wouldn't look overly natural, the wood patterns would be about right. After a first coat of this process, I really liked the patterns that I'd created. However, it was a little bit dark. It was a little bit too brown. I wanted to pare that back a little bit and keep it more in the white and light grey kind of family. So I applied just an extra bit of the Au Naturel to dial back some of the darkness. And in the end, I think it turned out really pretty. It's giving me like Jupiter planet kind of vibes. And there's also no right or wrong with this. You can just keep going until you're happy with it. And after I'd made it a little bit lighter, I thought it was really pretty. And the final step was to seal it. And you can see this was a little bit of a messy process. In fact, I ended up with a bit of a puddle on the floor. I did 2 coats of clear coat in satin to add some protection to this desk. Now, this isn't going to be a heavily used desk. I don't expect it need to hold up to too much crashing and bashing around, and especially I don't think this desk would hold a very strong weight. So a medium amount of protection I think will be great. I've already got this set up in my spare room. It's my new little nook for being able to edit my videos and write my blog, and I think it's a really great space. It's large, it's pretty, it's simple, and I can tuck my stool under it at the end of the day, and it's a really calm space to work. So for the sake of buying 4 new legs, using some scrap wood, which I'm so glad got to be repurposed into something else, and giving me a functional desk that I will be able to be really productive with. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this repurposing project. If you did, please consider subscribing. It makes a huge difference to smaller channels like mine. Or watch another video in the playlist. If you're interested in any of the products, I'll link them in the description below so you can find out more information about them. Alright, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, bye!